This is due to Carding's widespread damage in Central Luzon.
Sa kabila ng matinding pinsala sa agrikultura, tiniyak ng Department of Agriculture na sapat ang supply ng bigas sa bansa hanggang sa Disyembre.
Tingnan natin, bukod po sa Central Luzon, saan pa po tayo pwedeng kumuha ng bigas papunta dito sa Metro Manila. If we can ensure the sufficiency of supply dito sa Metro Manila, sana po hindi gumalaw ang presyo.
The damage to agriculture has gone up to over 3 billion pesos. The DA says widespread damage to farmlands in Central Luzon and the Cordilleras could push the prices of rice and vegetables up by 20%.
Vegetable and rice prices could go up by as much as 20%. That's after the recent typhoon damaged crops in Central Luzon, the country's top rice-producing region. Government is still leaning towards importing to manage prices and augment supply as needed. What does this mean for local farmers and consumers? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama natin sa studio, Ed Lingao of One News. We're both here in Mandaluyong. And from Manila, joining us online, Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. Chiefs, happy Friday.
Happy weekend.
Happy weekend.
Parang haba na linggo, no?
Oo nga. Nabalitaan mo? Ang sila President Duterte and his wing daw ng PDP-Laban na magiging fiscalizer sa gobyerno ni President Marcos.
Oo. Well, anyway, yung Liberal Party naman nag-election din. Nag-reorganize din, Si Albay Congressman Ed Selagman na yung bagong president and Kiko Pangilinan is moving up as chairman.
Sabi nila, nag-organize daw sila ngayon pa lang for 2025. And for that matter, for the barangay election, sabi nila.
Yeah, but you would think that they said the same thing after the 2019 debacle.
With Ocho Derecho.
Ocho Derecho. And then we saw what happened in 2022. So, question is, what will they change talaga this time?
In the meantime, Ami, ano pang mga headline natin heading into the weekend?
Nag-collate ang Department of Education ng data from local governments and the Department of Health kasi mukhang dumadami daw yung COVID sa mga klase. Kaya tinitingnan nila exact numbers. Saka sabi nga ng Okta, yung positivity rate ng Metro Manila, tuloy-tuloy ang pagtaas. Tumaas na naman siya.
Anyway, and in the meantime, of course, headline pa rin ang food situation. We will talk about that when we come back. We will speak to our first guest after the short break. Keep it right here on One News. Damage to agriculture from Super Typhoon Carding's onslaught is now being pegged at almost 2 billion pesos. What will this do to prices and supply of commodities as it reaches all of us? We now speak to Agriculture Development Specialist Fermin Adriano. Dr. Adriano is also a former Agriculture Undersecretary and economist with the Asian Development Bank. Welcome to the Chiefs, Mr. Adriano.
Good evening to all.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening to all.
Yeah, sir, we're hearing two different things after, well, actually for quite some time now, but also even after Typhoon Karding, we're hearing on the one hand assurances that supply is okay until the end of the year. We're also now hearing that prices could go up by as much as 20%. Are these both accurate statements? Are they actually reconcilable? How do people wrap their heads around what seems to be two things that at odds with each other?
Pero Bok, they came from the same department, different offices.
Anyway, what is not stated is the fact that for so long we have been a net importer of rice. In other words, our production could not keep pace with the increase in the demand. And if you look at the statistics from 2017 to 2021, our local production is about, well, of rice, this is already rice, because you can pala unhasol pala compared to rice. The average consumption is 12.5 million metric tons. The supply, rather. The other production, the harvest, the production is 12.5 million metric tons. However, the average demand or consumption for the same period, 2017 to 2021, is 13.4 million metric tons. In other words, we are not fully self-sufficient. We're only self-sufficient at 92 to 93% level. And the rest of the supply gap, we normally import that, which is about, we import from that same period 1.8 million metric tons a year to cover the deficit of about 8 to 10% or even to 12%, depending on whether destructive typhoons hits the country. So we are a net importer of rice. Yun ang sasabihin ko po. The second one is that you can say that we can have stable rice supply of rice if we are able to import the things that we need to import from neighboring countries. And most of them, 90% of them, come from Vietnam. So if we can get that from Vietnam, then we will have no problem in terms of the supply. Okay? But then the third point is about the price. The problem is that if you have a double whammy, there's a decline in production, local production, and there's an increase in the international price of rice in the global market, which will happen because India already imposes 20% tax on rice imports. Vietnam and Thailand are talking to each other to form a cartel, and because they want to jack up the prices of rice. That means that because of the double whammy, rice prices will definitely increase, whether we like it or not.
Okay. Wala pa doon yung factoring in the weak peso.
That's right. Yeah. That's an excellent point. Wala pa yung weak peso because the international price is pegged in dollars, di ba? Mga about $454 dollars per metric ton.
So basically
39 kilogram, 39 na ngayong mga dati 38. In other words, pag pinactor in mo yun, talagang prices will definitely prices will rise.
Okay, so basically, if you just so I get this right, am I understanding it correctly that the way you reconcile those two statements, na stable and yet tumataas, it's basically stable because we're going to import anyway. Diba? Stability is just a matter of importing, but then importing is the one that brings in a lot of the issues about the price.
Well, yeah, because it depends on the market, because for quite some time the rice prices are really down globally, but unfortunately because of this COVID and then plus the Russia, the conflict in Europe, that led to the increase in prices of all commodities, not just rice, but all commodities like corn, flour, soya beans, etc. So there's an uptrend, which is parang what they say is that this is not a perfect storm. This is a lasting storm that we are experiencing globally, not only in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Mr. Adriano, by way of supply lang, kasi sinabi na ng Department of Agriculture, kahit daw nawasak ng Typhoon Karding yung rice granary natin, enough supply naman. But usually, yung import natin, we expect lower imports, di ba? Around the fourth quarter dahil that's harvest season October to November, di ba? Paano yan? Nawasak 2 weeks before the harvest. Tapos ngayon tumataas yung peso. Hindi naman tayo pwede mag-order ng imported rice na agad-agad, di ba? Lalo naghihigpit nga yung mga sources natin. So, tama ba yun that we can be reassured na stable ang supply at least until the end of the year?
Medyo maraming uncertainty nga dyan. Tama nga yung sinabi mo. No? Kasi normally, dapat hindi sila pumasok ng October to November. Nung panahon namin, we're trying to protect that. Unfortunately, pag tinignan mo yung harvest season, yung peak harvest season sa Vietnam, it is July, August. Kaya pumapasok yan September, October dito. Kasi yung traders natin, by the way, rice trading is already in the hands of the private sector because of RTL. NFA does not have the power to buy rice anymore, to import rice. So, because of the lower price in July, August, bibili yung private traders natin, normally pumapasok yan September, October, during the peak harvest season. Yun ang problema natin palagi noon. Ano? Pero ang problema ngayon, dahil bumagsak nga itong, sabi, tama, tinamaan yun, ngayon, by November, December, wala ka na mabibili sa Vietnam yan masyado, sa Thailand. Kasi that's also the planting season in that country. So talagang very tight yung supply na yun dahil we cannot get the same level of production because of Typhoon Cardin and inadequate application of fertilizer, and yet we cannot buy easily in the global market because that's the planting season in the countries where we import.
So sir, tama yung sasabi ni Yusek Panganiban na we should expect a spike in the prices of rice by 20% as a result of carding. I was thinking kasi earlier na baka hindi dapat mangyari yon because we were supposed to be importing at a lower cost cheaper rice versus yung more expensive locally produced na tinamaan ng bagyo. So apparently tama nga dahil wala tayong ma-import masyado.
Yeah, ang bat ng importation natin, dalawang klase, yung regular milled rice tsaka yung well-milled rice. Doon sa regular milled rice, hindi na ini-import masyado yan kasi our production cost is practically competitive with Vietnam and particularly with Thailand if we impose a 35% tariff on imported rice. Makikita mo, ang importation doon sa well-milled rice, yun doon maraming importation na ginagawa yung private traders natin.
Mas mahal.
Kasi talagang kikita sila. Ang problema nga natin ngayon, tataas sa kanila, kahit na sabihin natin, wala itong typhoon carding, talagang tataas ang presyo because very tight yung supply sa global market. Because FAO projected a decline in global rice supply production this year. Samantalang tumataas ang demand sa kanya because of the switching of a lot of poor countries from wheat, dahil nga doon sa Ukraine, Russia, to rice consumption. Tumaas yung demand pero bumagsak yung supply. Particularly now na nagkaroon ng drought sa China, nagka-flooding, which is a big rice producer, and then Pakistan, which is another, I think, number 4 rice producer in the world. And of course, India also experienced some drought. So talagang bumagsak globally yung production. So even wala yung typhoon carding, talagang ang projection ko namin noon, nung pinag-aaralan namin yan, talagang tataas talaga yung you cannot stop it anymore. Plus the fact na tumaas yung production cost mo na fertilizer, fuel, etc. etc.
Mr. Adriano, just to be clear, rice pa lang ang pinag-uusapan natin.
Yes.
Okay. What's the situation with other crops? Corn, for example, vegetables?
Talagang, as I said in my column, in one of my columns in another paper, I already predicted, I made the bold prediction, I hope I will be wrong for the sake of our people, that we're going to have a food shortage, a serious food shortage, by the end of this year or early next year across the board. Kasi like yung corn, we are only supplying 57% of corn as animal feeds. The rest are imported from abroad or substituted by feed wheat. Natamaan po yan dahil doon sa Ukraine-Russia war kasi Ukraine is one of the biggest exporter of corn, and of course, a biggest exporter of wheat. Ganon din po, may ASF pa tayo sa baboy, di ba? Pumutok na naman. Tapos may bird flu pa tayo sa manok. Tapos na tinamaan yung mga poultry natin, including the layers. And we are a little bit hesitant to import the grandparent stocks kasi they're suspecting that the bird flu virus might have been gotten in those grandparents or breeder stock. So across the board, nakita na naman ninyo, dahil nga sa typhoon carding, grabe din yung pagtaas ng presyo ng mga gulay. So it's across the board. Tuyo, we have a shortage in fish. In fact, sardines manufacturers are downgrading their operations because of the lack of supply of fish for sardine materials. So it's across the board, even salt, the lowly salt.
Okay, so
Adriano, namumroblema din, of course, yung mga farmers, ano kaya pwedeng magawa sa kanila, no? Short term and long term, matagal nang pinag-usapan, but in the short term, yung mga nawasak lahat ng farms nila, naghahanda na sila sana mag-harvest, what can be done for them at this point?
Ang pinakamabilis na ayuda will be a cash transfer, a condition, that's the easiest way. And then you go forward in terms of preparing, rehabilitating those facilities. But eventually, we need to do clustering or consolidation of those farms. We can no longer be efficient. We are not efficient because our farms are so small. We need to organize our farmers into better cooperatives. We need consolidations so that we can enjoy economies of scale. Not necessarily consolidation of ownership, but production consolidation, proper scheduling, so that we can easily give the necessary assistance to them. Government has to talk to just a few people, etc., and then clear yung mabibigay natin sa kanila. And of course, by the way, we're already 100 days under this administration. We need a plan, an agricultural development plan.
Doon nga po ako papunta. Sir, I mean, long-term nga itong nabanggit at natanong ni Ami, but in the meantime, sabi nyo nga, we're headed into, as you said, a serious food crisis by the end of this year or at the least by the first quarter of next year. So that's basically 3 months. What is the President, the Agriculture Secretary for that matter, what is he to do? What would you recommend is still possible by way of intervention?
Well, just like any business, if you're in a business enterprise and you know that prices are still not very high in the international market like rice, you need to buy now. You stock, di ba? That's the only way that you can do. It's a short term, although it's unpopular, but it's a necessary evil that we need to do. We need to build up our stocks, our inventory of all those products, just like what China is doing. They're buying all the corn in the world. Vietnam has lowered their tariffs on pork to 3% so that they will be able to buy as much pork as they can and store them. So I think that's a commonsensical business decision. If you see that there's going to be a crisis, let's buy now so that we can put more stocks in our warehouses and inventory.
And
but that will require importation, which
yeah.
I don't think that the administration is sympathetic to.
Yeah, but and if we were to get to that, we couple that as well with lowering tariffs as well.
Oh yeah, kasi ganun na. We still impose about 35%, 40% on corn. Vietnam has already brought it down to 3%. Same with China, same with Thailand. They're all doing that now because they're really stocking up their inventory. That's the only way to hedge against this food crisis that is going to happen. It might be unpopular, but eventually they will see the wisdom of that decision.
But is there any
by next year?
But sir, is there any indication that they are aware of that problem and that they are headed in that direction? And if they are not headed in that direction, is there anything else that can be done later down the road?
Well, the data shows it. The official data of the Philippine Statistics Authority, if you look at the trends and then you make a projection, you look at the global data, you look at FAO, World Bank data, they all point to the same thing, that we need to, there's going to be a food crisis. In fact, Earlier, they even said it's a food catastrophe.
Mr. Adriano, you mentioned farm consolidation, no, for the farmers to make agrarian reform work. But people have been talking about it for decades. I
Yes,
think
sir.
simula nung umpisan pa yung CARPE. What's holding it back? Anong problema? Bakit hindi siya matuloy-tuloy?
Kasi there's a disconnect between the DA and the ground level farm implementation, because all of our extension workers have been devolved to the LGUs, di ba? So if the LGUs do not prioritize agricultural development, we cannot do anything, di ba? Yun ang problema eh. You keep on saying, okay, let's do this program. But if the LGU is not cooperative, what can the DA do?
Hindi pwedeng DA ang mag-organize. Halimbawa, you will form cooperatives within a certain area, kahit pilot man lang, hindi pa pwede.
We have done that, ma'am. Unfortunately, we're so tired of pilots. In this country, there's so many pilots. Nakakasabi ko nga kakasawa na yung pilots. We need to upscale, because that's the only way to be able to increase our productivity. Like what, Chinese nga, communist na yan, tapos yung Vietnam, Chinese, they consolidated their lands. But the thing is that they heavily invested in what they call community organizing, social mobilization, or what we call in the literature, building or strengthening social cohesion. You need real organizers to do that. But the organizers are in the hands of the LGUs, or you have to recruit people for that purpose. But it's not a priority, unfortunately. So ganun yung problema eh. You want to do it, but you cannot execute because the link between the central programs has been cut off by the decentralization. And I kept on telling, we need to do a review of that LG Local Government Code of 1991. Of all the laws, talagang wala kang magawa eh. Like even controlling ASF. If the LGUs or LGU does not want to cooperate, all of those guidelines that you do at the department level cannot be implemented or will not be implemented or even will be challenged by the LGU. So there has to be right now a real analysis or a real review of this local government code.
Sir, the President still is holding on concurrently to the agriculture portfolio, and in a way that seemed to make sense at the start kasi it's a message of giving priority to agriculture. But from your point of view, has he been able to give enough attention and the time to the problems of agriculture?
It will be extremely difficult. You can just see the amount of papers that you have to sign. I was an undersecretary. Undersecretary lang ako. I received more than 100 emails. I have to attend to 4 to 5 meetings a day on top of talking to my staff. So you can just see, I don't think a part-time person can really do the job. But there's just too huge a challenge right now, particularly now that we are in a crisis. And it requires a level of technical competence. It's not just, you can say a slogan or something like that, we will increase productivity. You need to have a technical person that when you say target, I want to increase productivity by this, but how are you going to achieve that? What are the elements of achieving that? What are the programs? How do you schedule it so that the delivery of services can reach the farmers? And as on top of that, how can you increase the farmers' income by greater value chain, like processing of those products to attain greater value for their products? So it requires a really competent individual to move things around in the agricultural sector. Hindi yan gentleman farming lang. It is more than that because of all these dynamics, including international trade agreements that you have to look into and the global supply and demand thing. Yeah.
Sir, nandun pa rin ako sa serious food shortage nyo eh. Hindi ako makamove on doon. Serious food shortage. Does the 20% projection in increase in prices, does that capture the seriousness, or is 20% still not even it?
It captures already. If it's 20%, that shoots. Because when we pass RTL from 2019 to 2021, the contribution of rice to inflation is negative 23%. This year, from January to August, the contribution is now more than 12%. So that means that if prices increase, inflation will increase because the bulk of the expenditure of the poor goes to purchasing rice. 60 to 70% of the poor's income is already spent on food. And out of that 60% or 100% of that, 100 to 60%, about 20 to 30% of that goes to purchasing rice. So if rice prices go up, our inflation will definitely hit more than 7%. That's my bold prediction.
Balikan ko lang, Mr. Adriano, si President and Concurrent Agriculture Secretary Marcos. Considering his huge mandate, hindi kaya pwedeng sabihan niya yung mga LGU, lahat yan halos kakampi niya na, well, tulungan niyo na kami dito, ituloy na natin tong farm consolidation, give us more cooperation to make things work. Di ba pwede rin yun? Considering the situation, ano?
Pwede yun. Ang problema mo, Will Dave, yung follow-up. Kasi madali naman, yes sir. What you need to do, if you're a good manager, we come out with agreement or memorandum of understanding, we will increase it. We will give you the necessary resources. That's our compact. But we will monitor you. Kailangan niya may monitoring and evaluation so that you will know whether you're progressing or not. In the absence of monitoring and evaluation, wala yun, suntok sa hangin yun, di ba? Madaling magsalita But systematic governance is a different matter because systematic governance needs accountability from the people who lead.
O kaya ba ng Department of Agriculture na mag-monitor?
Kaya naman. Meron naman tao and then you can actually job contract or contract of services to people. You can ask the World Bank or Asian Development to help you in this regard. And they've been pushing for it. The benefit cost analysis of programs.
Yes.
That itong makinarya nato, farm machinery nato, okay, you have distributed a lot of machineries, but panahon pa ni Pinoy yan yung agri-makina nila. Pero wala namang naging impact evaluation na ginawa, di ba? Palagi taon-taon ganun din, ganun ang ginagawa. Walang impact evaluation. Nobody seems to be interested on measuring impacts and measuring results or non-results. And during our time, I was trying to push hard for it. Because you say, we cannot progress properly without monitoring and evaluation. Sa korporasyon ginagawa yan, ma'am, di ba?
Wala ba kayo nakikitang opposition kung sakasakala? If that thing is implemented, wala kayo nakikitang opposition from other players in the industry? Maraming mga layers of middlemen dyan Di ba din nakakangin yan?
Marami tayong, kunyari, if you say that magka-import, of course, the local producers will protest or object to it because that will impact on their simple and their profit, Ganun talaga yun But the challenge to leadership and to policy making in general is we have to abide by the principle in good policy making. The greatest benefit to the greatest number of people in the country. So we go for that kind of policy decision, not just one sector who's very influential, but attaining the maximum benefit for the greatest number of people in the country. That should be the rule. Unfortunately, it's an exception rather than rule in this country.
Sir, balayan ko lang yung tanong ni Roby kanina. Yung sinasabi ni Yusek Panganiban na 20% increase in the price of rice. Sabi nga ninyo, yes, it's an indicator of the impending food shortage. Pero how bad could it get? How high could it go in terms of, for example, spike in prices of rice?
We never know. Kasi we don't know. It's going to happen like the 2008. Diba? 2008. It went as high as $700 per metric tons, and we were bidding, if I recall right, at $1,000 per metric ton. It's about 453 now. So there's a possibility that it might happen that way if other countries, like for example China, bid higher because it suffered from drought and buy a lot because there's only about 14 million metric tons of rice traded in the international market. If somebody corners a great part of it, the possibility of prices really soaring, I think will occur. Yun yung problem. Ang problema natin kasi across the board eh.
Yeah.
In economics, we have the law of supply and demand. If prices are rising, that means there's something wrong with the supply, which we have seen in the sugar sector. Tingnan mo. Kahit anong sabihin nila, ang dami na, ganyan. Nasa 100 pesos pa rin. Tapos sasabihin na, pagdating ng importation, import na November, magiging 70. 70, 52 lang yan dati.
Yeah.
Utang na loob po natin sa kanila ngayon 70, ganun ba yun? What? 52 lang po yan eh. 52 lang yun bago nagsipa ang presyo. So, it's elementary economics. If prices are rising, most likely there is a shortage of that commodity.
Mr. Adriano, your whole point about importation and our limited options there, and in fact our long-standing policies and practices there, that's well taken. But going back to the production here and whatever that can contribute, President Marcos said at his SONA na at least inaasahan niya yung the remaining harvest cycles in the country. Tapos ito na nga, tinamaan na nga sa Central Luzon, tinamaan yung rice dyan, tinamaan yung corn. That's Central Luzon. Ano pa po bang natitirang barahan natin? What else is remaining by way of the remaining harvest seasons for whatever crops? Are all those vulnerable as well? And how vulnerable are they in the entire situation to, we have a handful of typhoons still expecting in the final quarter?
One is, of course, I already said, you need to import. But I already heard about the announcement that there's, from the DA itself, that there's no need to import during the fourth quarter. That really worried me. The second option, of course, is, if we can convince our people to eat other commodities as a substitute to rice, like corn grits or saba, banana, or potato, sweet potato, that would be good, That's the only choices that we have right now.
Okay.
Di ba kinulang din ang potato? Di ba?
Masarap yun.
Hindi pa rin maka-order ng large french fries.
Actually, they're more nutritious, by the way. Saging na saba, potato, and corn. Actually, they're more nutritious than rice. If you ask any nutritionist, mas paano yun. Kaya lang, may preferred taste tayo sa rice. That's the problem. And we always I associate that if there's no rice, people are already suffering from hunger. Di ba? Ganun yung thinking. Because gutom na, ganun ang thinking. Pero hindi naman totoo dapat yun. They're actually substitute for rice. But we need to educate our people to eat other commodities.
Kaya
yung mayayaman nga, hindi na kumakain ng rice, di ba? Para gumanda lang.
Kaya pala parati akong gutom. Kasi pinagbabawalan ako sa rice.
Iba naman ang dahilan nun
Pati yung corn kulang eh. Sabi ng mga broiler producers
Oh yeah?
we're not producing enough corn.
Yeah. Because we meet only about yung yellow corn. This is, kasi dalawang variety, yung open pollinated or white corn, which is being used for human consumption. Yung puti. Yung yellow corn is really for animal feeds like poultry or hogs. We are only producing about 57 to 59% self-sufficient sa corn. Unfortunately, pag tinignan mo yung production cost ng hogs tsaka ng poultry, about 50 to 60% ng feed, tataas yung final product mo na meat, di ba? Yun yung problema. May value chain to eh. Kaya tumataas din yung presyo ng chicken mo, yung itlog mo, lalo na sa layer, 90% of their consumption is yellow corn. So that parang yung itlog na pula talaga maging yellow. Kasi pag malabdaw yun, ibig sabihin pinakakain doon, feed wheat.
Okay.
Yun po yun.
Agriculture Specialist Dr. Fermin Adriano. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain things.
Thank you, sir.
And more power. Thank you.
Let's start up another conversation after a break. Stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
We are not putting up a strong party against the party of the president. We are not going to quarrel with him. Far from it. We will be giving our full support.
Former President Rodrigo Duterte is staying on as chairman of PDP-Laban as it looks to serve as, quote, fiscalizer to the Marcos administration.
Pag may nakita tayong masama, we will raise our voice because that is the essence of our presence here.
The Duterte-led wing is calling on the current government to continue what the Duterte administration started. These include pushing through with anti-insurgency efforts and the fight against illegal drugs.
The former administration party vows to be both a supporter and fiscalizer to the Marcos administration. Just how will they do it? Let's ask Attorney Melvin Matibag. He is the Secretary General of the PDP-Laban under the Duterte wing. Sir, Attorney, maraming salamat for joining us tonight. Welcome back to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi po at maraming salamat po sa pag-imbita. Kamusta na po kayo?
Kamusta po kayo? Medyo matagal-tagal na po tayo hindi nakapag-usap.
Long time, sir.
Wala po ng eleksyon. Sir, balikan ko lang po yung sinabi ng dating Pangulo dun sa kanyang talumpati. Sabi niya, we will be giving our full support, but at the same time, we will fiscalize. I'm wondering if you see any conflict there. It's not even a conditional support, it's full support, pero at the same time, fiscalize. What kind of a role are you looking at for the PDP-Laban as far as this administration is concerned?
Well, first, ang sinasabi po ni Pangulo noon, even before, I think I have to tell this story. It's been a long time, I think this can be told. Before nung mag-start po yung election, yung campaign for the local election, that was March 20, we had a meeting. We arranged a meeting with at that time, President Rodrigo Duterte is the incumbent, and PBBM is still a candidate. So nagkaroon po ng pag-meeting. And that meeting lasted for 6 hours. Marami pong napag-usapan. Hindi naman po nag-declare ng personal na support si PRRD. Hindi siya nagbanggit ng endorsement. But of course, the party asked for a permission to endorse PBBM as the candidate to PDP-Laban. At yan nga po yung nangyari. So lagi naman pong sinasabi, even during that meeting namin, na kung maging presidente siya, and now he's the president, we want PBBM to succeed. Because the success of PBBM will be the success of the country. So yung sinasabi pong that we are giving 100% support, doon po nanggagaling yun that we want him to succeed. So yung mga projects po niya, programs, supportahan po ng partido. Pero yung sinasabing if there is a need to fiscalize, yun naman po talaga yung direction ng Pangulo, ng dating Pangulong Duterte, at kami rin po sa PDP-Laban na kung may mali na kailangan pong i-call out at sabihin, paalam sa tao at magsalita para sa tao, we will do so. So yun po yung ibig sabihin ng Pangulo dyan.
Yes,
at yun din po yung napapag-usapan namin during our small meetings po.
Yes, sir. For example, sir, yung pagbisita ng Pangulo dun sa US sa isang interview dun sa isang foreign network, well, the President was a bit critical of the former President's drug war. He was talking about some excesses in the drug war. At the same time, he was saying na what we want to do is go after not the person selling weed for what, 100 pesos thereabouts. We want to go after the big fish. So in a way, some people saw it as parang a critique of the former president's drug war.
Well, una-una, hindi ko napakinggan yan, but if it transpire, for us, hindi naman conflict eh. But probably it's a varying opinion or how to approach it. Magkaiba po na approach. Yung pong kay Pangulo, siyempre, all-out war kay PRRD noon sa drugs. That's why kami nga po sa PDP-Laban, nagpasa kami ng resolution to remind and to continue the war against drugs. And so far naman po, siguro yung unang mga araw talaga ni Pangulong Duterte sa administrasyon niya, it was really an intense drug war. Talaga po namang lahat, from the user to small seller to big fish meron. Pero kung tingnan niyo naman po ngayon, I think few weeks ago, si Secretary Benar Abalos, tuloy-tuloy yung drug war niya. In fact, may mga nahuli po, malalaking volume yung nahuli. So I don't think naman po na we should interpret it as a criticism to the drug war of former President PRRD, kundi magkaiba lang po siguro na approach ng administration. But just the same, ang bottom line po, parehas pa rin po na i-continue yung war against illegal drugs.
May isa pang area na medyo nagkakaiba sila, no? That's in counter-insurgency. Mukhang, we're basing it on the statements of the new National Security Advisor. Sabi niya, dapat daw iba yung approach. Saka mas mahina talaga, she's against red tagging. Ayaw niya yung mga, hindi naman niya sinabing ayaw niyang ginagawa ng NTF-ELCAC, pero kung ano yung ginagawa ng NTF-ELCAC noon, mukhang nag-iiba ngayon, mukhang lumilihis yung administrasyon. Ano naman yon? Do you think there's a need in that area to call out the new administration na, oy, delikado yan at medyo malalatong problema to sa insurgency at baka naman kailangan i-reconsider yung policy. You think there's a need to say that? I know it's not yet 100 days, no? Pero hindi pa tapos yung 100 days. Pero sa tingin nyo, in this area, medyo magkakalihis ng paniwala yung previous and new administration.
Well, una-una po, yun nga yung isang naging resolution ng unanimously approved by PDP-Laban yesterday na we call for a continuation of the NTF-ELCAC program of PRRD, of former President Duterte. And sabi ko, balikan ko yung meeting namin noong March 20, nung nag-usap kami for the 6 hours, there was a commitment na ginawa po ni BBM na itutuloy niya. And in fact, several times we hear also BBM saying na tutuloy natin yung ELCAC. Ayun naman pong pinanggagalingan ng sa NTF-ELCAC, hindi naman lang po nanggaling kay PRRD, kundi nanggaling po yan doon sa LGUs namin eh. Nung kahapon po namin na meeting, yung anniversary celebration, well-attended po yan. We have almost 600 attendees and half of the attendees are elected local government officials, mga mayors po, councilors, vice governor, governors, board members, na sinasabi nila yung need na ituloy yung ELCAC. In fact, one of the attendees there, former Governor Nancy Catamco of North Cotabato, siya talaga yung nagsasabi na nagkaroon talaga ng zero insurgency sa area niya sa North Cotabato at the time that the ELCAC is being done. So, palagay ko naman po, siguro yung nagiging statement po ni Secretary Carlos, hindi ko man po siya personally narinig, but I have to give due respect to that, na meron po siguro siyang pinanggagalingan doon sa sinasabi niya, and hindi naman po siguro totally sinasabing aalisin na yung ELCAC. So, ibig sabihin, we will continue to push na sana ituloy at kung ano yung pwede pong gawin. We are well represented pa naman po PDP-Laban in the halls of Congress and even in Senate and saka po sa local government. I think PDP-Laban will have a voice to tell to the administration that kailangan natin talaga ituloy itong NTF-ELCAC program ng dating administrasyon.
But Attorney, I mean, running government is so complicated, as you know, and certainly as former President Duterte certainly knows himself. Do you anticipate that there will be policy issues? I mean, let's put the drug war aside. Let's take foreign policy aside. and all of these controversies attendant to Mr. Duterte before. But you look at, kanina lang, kausap namin, for example, specialist in agriculture, Dr. Fermin Adriano. And do you anticipate any differences in the approach, let's say, on importation of commodities, importation of rice, sugar, and so on? A lot of these controversial things that are now on the desk and that will become of bigger concern to Mr. Marcos.
Yes, Robbie. Of course, every person at the administration will have various approach or different approach. It will vary. Magkakaiba-iba talaga yung mga approach, how to implement it. But at the end of the day, ano ba talaga yung ending dapat nito and who should benefit from it? Doon po nanggagaling yung sinasabi ni Presidente PDP-Laban. At the end of the day, it should be for the general welfare of the people of the Philippines, yung pong ating public. So, okay lang naman kung mag-iiba yung direction, mag-iiba yung approach na ginagawa. Siyempre, we will look at the end result. Kagaya po niyan, yung sinasabi, set aside. I don't think na isa-set aside naman yung mga gagawin. But I think there will be a priority. Every administration have its own agenda na pinaprioritize nila. And we welcome that and we're open to that. We will not say that it's wrong or is it right. Kasi siyempre kanila na approach. But we will constantly remind, ito ginawa na, this is tried and tested, nasubukan at paganda nga. Going back to NTF-ELCAC, talaga naman po yung report ng mga LGUs natin na officials, talagang it is successful. So I think we will really push on it. So tatlo po yung aming resolution na tinulak dyan, yung sa drug war, yung NTF-ELCAC, and the other one is the charter change.
Sir, let me go back to my first question kanina. What kind of a role do you foresee for PDP-Laban in the coming years, especially for 2025 and then 2028? Kumbaga, ano magiging papel ninyo vis-a-vis this administration, vis-a-vis the President's current party? Are you going to be a firm supporter or part of a coalition? Are you going to be the other opposition group? Because there's some speculation about that. I don't know how true that is. So what do you foresee?
Well, we are fortunate that the leader of our party, the chairman of the party, is former President Rodrigo Duterte, who enjoys a net satisfaction of 88% na umalis siya. So, it's sabihin, he's really champion. We're looking to him. So, we will look at your direction. Siya yung compass ng partido namin ngayon. Siya yung titingnan namin. And I think, dun yung tanong mo po, sir, is nandoon na sa sinabi ni Pangulong Duterte, we will support this administration. We are putting up our party. We are strengthening the party not to pick up a fight. We are far from it. Yun yung sinabi niya. At sabi niya, but if there's a need to fiscalize, we will fiscalize. So, ang sa akin po dito, lalo na ngayon, it's too early the day to say it. Sabi nga kanina ni Ma'am Ami, wala pa tayong 100 days eh. So let's see where will it go. Pero so far, kami naman po, ako siguro on a personal note, I can say, I think majority of our party mates will agree with me. Meron naman po talagang the administration now is doing their great strides to do what is good for the people. Dahil naman po niya sa Singapore, sa Indonesia, then US, yielded a lot of investment as well. And I know it's a difficult time, kanya-kanyang hirap yung administrasyon. Panahon ni Pangulong Duterte, may pandemic. Ngayon naman, pagpasok ng administrasyon naman ni PBBM, andyan naman yung gera natin sa Russia at sa Ukraine. Tapos medyo lumalakas yung dollar, bumababa yung piso. So may mga challenges po tayo na inaharap. And rest assured that the role of PDP-Laban is to make sure that the mandate that is given to this administration na gusto ng tao mapaglingkuran sila will definitely be done na mangyari talaga. Yun din po yung sinabi ni Pangulong Duterte.
Mr. Matibag, nabanggit niyo yung US trip eh. Kasi that's another area where there has been a marked difference, no? Isa sa unang-unang binisita ni President Marcos US eh. And for the past 6 years, yung presidente ng Pilipinas never set foot in the US. So obviously, nag-iiba yung policy toward the US. May nakikita ba yung partido nyo na any danger there? At least in the balance of power, for example, within our region, na hindi ba delikado yan considering what's happening, the geopolitics in the region?
Well, yun na po yung sinabi ko. I go back to what I said earlier na Siyempre, yung kanya-kanyang administrasyon, kanya-kanyang pinuno will have different approach. So, in one area ngayon, foreign policy, sinabi naman, natatanda ko sinabi ni PBBM, we will be enemies to none and friends to everyone. So I think yun yung ginagawa niya. The same din naman kay Pangulong Duterte na he doesn't pick up a fight sa China, sa US, but if he see that something is wrong to what is known, to kung anong tingin niya na disadvantage sa country, he will voice it out. Outspoken to si PRRD, talagang sasabihin niya ng diretso, ayoko pumunta sa Amerika. Siyempre, nung campaign pa lang, nakita naman natin, meron ng konting strain. But just the same, pag may bumisita naman dito na representative from the US, he will graciously accept. Pag may tulong na pwedeng ibigay, pwedeng tanggapin, tatanggapin din naman. Siguro it's more in the style and the approach. Hindi naman siguro talagang opposite direction kung ano yung policy nila on the foreign issues.
Now, sir, balikan ko lang yung point nyo about yung ibang style lang. Nasabi nyo nga, fiscalizing, di man ibig sabihin automatic opposition ka. That you're just sharing na itong style namin dati, this worked, this is what we would recommend. To my point kanina, as you know, the President is himself the Secretary of Agriculture. It looks like, based on the news and based on our conversations with experts, sabi nila there's a looming serious food crisis, is the way Dr. Adriano mentioned it kanina. Tataas ang presyo by 20%. There was this fiasco about the sugar importation. Hindi rin alam ng mga farmers natin kung saan lulugar. So very, very complicated. But just on a simple difference of style, but just to see how the fiscalizing function and advice comes in here. Would you advise the President to appoint a separate secretary, for example, to the Department of Agriculture? Or would you support his initial instinct to take on the portfolio himself?
Well, from what you said, Roby, siguro yung initial instinct niya is to take the helm of the leadership in Department of Agriculture because he feels na dapat directly i-manage niya, naka-hands-on talaga siya dyan. Pero I'm sure, yung pag-appoint naman ng permanent na secretary, I think nasa periferis niya, he is considering it. Baka naman naghahanap pa lang talaga kung sino yung right fit dun sa trabaho na yan. So sabi ko nga, it's too early on the day to say na ito mali or tama because siguro let's give our President a break na bigyan natin siya ng chance na wala pa nga yung 100 days na tinitingnan natin. Pero sabi ko nga, I'm sure everything that we're talking about is being considered by the President and by his group. So I will not say na dapat mag-appoint ka na ngayon, but I'm sure he is considering appointing a permanent secretary. Alam naman niya, sigurado yung gagawin niya dyan. It's just so that I think, hinahanap pa niya kung sino talaga yung right fit doon sa trabaho na yan. It's not only in the Department of Agriculture, also in the Department of Health. Yeah, but I think he has able people also to do the job so that matawid natin yung mga problemang pinagdadaanan sa department.
Mr. Matibag, pahabol ko lang. Ano na yung mangyayari dun sa party, yung two factions ng PDP-Laban? Ano na ba status ng dispute ninyo? Parang hindi na yata ma-resolve.
Well, salamat po at bringing out po yung issue na yan because it was already been resolved by COMELEC and Bank na ang rightful leadership belongs to the group po na ang chairman is si PRRD at ang presidente at that time is si Secretary Cusi. So happened that of course yung legal process po natin, merong motion for reconsideration, they appeal up to the Supreme Court. Nag-motion for reconsideration po ang grupo po ni Senator Pimentel. Pero kami po, just the same, even during the time ni Secretary Cusi as president of the party, we've been reaching out. Kasi we know the rule. Politics is not division, it's always addition. It will be a stronger PDP kung magkakasama po lahat yan. So kami naman po, we're open to talks. Although kami nga po yung nasa advantage ngayon because as we speak now, kami po yung rightful talaga na PDP-Laban. Wala pong wing talaga ngayon. But there's one PDP-Laban and that PDP-Laban is the PDP-Laban na ang chairman is si former President of Duterte.
Meron bang ongoing reconciliation talks?
Well, meron pong mga feelers na pinapaabot sa amin at meron din naman po kami mga pinapaabot. So wala pa naman pong formal. What we will do right now after our convention yesterday is to organize the office. We're transferring our office from Alabang to BGC. We have new sets of officers. So yung mga staff, ayusin po namin in all the documentation. And we start to go around sa mga local leaders po namin to build the party's grassroots pa rin po at palakasin po yung mga LGUs po namin.
Okay. Attorney Melvin Matibag. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Salamat po. Magandang
Ingat
gabi po sa inyo. Salamat po.
Attorney Matibag is Secretary General of the PDP-Laban, how do we say it now? Still under the Duterte.
Duterte wing.
Oh, it's still under, may petition pa rin for reconsideration. So, Melvin Matibag, Secretary General still of the PDP-Laban under the Duterte wing. And that's it for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.